Optimum is here. From fast to 100% fiber fast. Get award-winning internet, mobile, and TV. Call 866-9-OPTIMUM or visit Optimum.com.
Incident with the Double T 97.3 Twitter account over the weekend, and I cannot confirm or deny that Clint Scott was suspended as a result. But either way, he'll be gone all week, and then maybe back next Monday. We'll see. There's an appeal process, I think, that has to take place.
That's funny. I thought he was just vacationing in the Hamptons.
No, it's. I mean, he might have gone there, as a result of his unexpected, hiatus from work. But no, he's been suspended. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments today on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at doublet973.com. All guests appear via the Benchmark hotline. A lot to get to in the program today. Of course, the Red Raider football team finally heading into the open week. The gauntlet that was this team's first 6 games is over. The Red Raiders, I would say, with a very, very respectable showing over the weekend in Stillwater, ultimately falling in double digits, although it, much like the K-State game, doesn't really tell the true tale of that game. But now they have an off week to get healthy and prepare for a back half of the schedule that, while easier, is not just kind of lay down and show up easy. It's going to be a tough road to get to 6 wins. But here we are in 2 weeks, basically, between football games for the Red Raiders. Gus, how you going?
I'm good. Yeah, it feels like a good time for it. Learning what we learned about the banged up shoulder, and just, you're 6 weeks in, 6 weeks in a row, coming out of camp. There's dudes banged up, and this is probably a really good time for it. I'd much rather have this open week now than where TCU had theirs after 3 weeks of the season, and then they're going to reel off 9 weeks in a row.
It's funny. I mean, I should have probably mentioned this right off the jump, but I mean, you and I discussed on Friday the possibility of Baron Morton starting because somebody texted into the program and said, "Hey, I heard such and such." And, we talked about it for probably a good 20 minutes. We agreed with the texter that it sounds kind of unlikely, but lo and behold, that's what happened. And it just goes to show you, just don't discount out of hand what people toss out there on message boards or Twitter or, the Yates Flooring Center chat line, because every so often it's true, right? And I remember back to late November, early December 2013, where somebody texted into our show during our show and said, "Hey, Sonny Cummings going to go to TCU to be the OC for Gary Patterson." And what are you talking about? That's not going to happen. And then lo and behold, that's what indeed happened. So there you go.
Yeah, that's it certainly wasn't implausible. I mean, at that point on Friday, down to 2 quarterbacks. 2 healthy quarterbacks, and what we didn't know was that Donovan hadn't thrown much during the week and was banged up, like throwing shoulder banged up. And I don't think they made it sound like it's the kind of thing that's going to be fine after an open week and probably a lot of treatment and R&R this week. But that was it was an interesting day. I mean, there was lots to like. Ultimately, the result, not what we wanted in this part of the world, but dudes got after it. I mean, what is Coach McGuire's brand? Most competitive,
toughest, hardworking, most competitive, something like that.
And boy, they've lived up to the most competitive side of it. I mean, just hanging around. They had no business hanging around at NC State in that game. Turning it over and just kind of all the mess that happened out there. And just, we've seen now 3 road games and unfortunately 3 losses, but a team that was competitive and competing and getting after it the entire way. If anything that was resolved, I don't say resolved, but because this could happen again at any moment, but they made a concerted effort to get off to a better start in Stillwater, and they did. They got off to a better start and played with the lead for a minute. I don't know what this team's going to do if they're ever playing ahead like 20 points. Because it just had to happen. I mean,
not since week 1.
No, every snap of this season has had implications and repercussions.
I mean, you led at the half, which, considering you didn't score a point against this team last year, putting up 24 without really, it's not like you scored 24 points on the back of 5 turnovers, right? Or a couple of big, gigantic special teams plays. I mean, these were just touchdowns, right? 11 play drive, 10-play drive, 8-play drive, 18-play drive in the first half. And you hung with them. And, you didn't have enough. And it certainly seemed like once Barron got dinged up there toward the end of the first half, he did not seem as, as on target, as good as he was in the first half. And maybe that's the injury. Maybe that's adjustments that were made on the other side by Derek Mason and that Oklahoma State defense. Maybe it's some combination of the two. But certainly you were far more effective on offense in the first half than you were in the second. But either way, again, I think it's one of those games, much like the game in Manhattan, where I have a hard time getting too pissed about kind of what happened,
Right.
If this happens in year 4, it's a totally different scenario.
Yep.
But given this is game 6 and, the 5th game in a row of a ranked gauntlet, I kind of felt okay about it.
Yep. I hope that this is the kind of game that we look back on 2-3 years from now and look back, man, remember the first year, these were the games that were so hard to get, and it maybe in the same way that we look back on Tadlock's first year and Beard's first year and some of the, that just when you have the hindsight of, hey, this thing's turned around and rolling, that you can look back on the first year and go, there were signs of life right there. Sign of life right there. Sign of life right there. I hope that's where this team is. It feels that way. And again, I keep coming back to the fact that there's a ton of dudes off this team that can be back next year, and hopefully added to with a good recruiting class and maybe a portal need or two. I did leave, and this isn't going to change this year, but I did leave that game, or I literally wasn't there. I don't make it sound that way, but that when that game ended, I had the same thought in my mind. Still don't have that home run hitter, and in some way, all of my analogies come back to baseball for an obvious reason. But you just said it. They do pretty good things to reel off these double-digit play scoring drives. And I think it was the Texas game that they had 5 of them.
Right.
10, 11, 13, 15, 17.
You're not getting the benefit of anything easy.
Right. There's not many times. And one time they had single coverage, like really nice. I think it was an RPO. Hit Cleveland kind of on that a slant route, and it's the play that you see Bama make, and where the dude catches it and just runs away. Just runs away and scores, and you're like, wow, that was easy. And we make that play, and it's a really nice play. Everything about it is nice, and the 20-yard gain is nice, but there's just no home run, hardly ever, and so everything's a grind. And boy, they continue to grind, and I tip my cap to them.
Our grind is just beginning here on Tech Talk. We'll have the juice coming up next on Lubbock Sports Station Double T 97.3.
Solving life's mysteries one at a time.
When I go to the restroom after having a few pops in my acid-washed overalls, when I go into that restroom after about 10 beers, urinal to the floor, I'm going pants down to the ankles.
Hey there, Mr. Wiener, what do you know? Do you need to tinkle? Yes, I do think so.
This is Tech Talk on Double T 97.3.
It's the juice on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com. Your look at today's biggest sports headlines, brought to you by our good friends at Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods. 2 convenient locations here in town, 4th Street and the West Loop behind the Whataburger, and also Slide Road and 69th Street. And if you can't get out and about today, I know the weather's not great, you can always go to specsonline.com as well. No baseball today. Playoffs will resume tomorrow with the division series matchups. Mariners and Astros will be underway pretty much 24 hours from now. First pitch from Houston, 2:37. We'll have that game for you on 100.7 The Score. Phillies and Braves will be underway tomorrow at noon. You've got the Guardians and the Yankees tomorrow evening at 6:30. And in the late game, Padres at the Dodgers, 8:37 first pitch from Los Angeles. The Carolina Panthers have fired head coach Matt Rhule less than 6 full months after owner David Tepper said it would take 5, maybe 6 years to rebuild an organization capable of sustained excellence. Rhule's firing today came less than 24 hours after a 37-15 loss to the San Francisco 49ers, and less than 3 years into a 7-year, $62 million contract he was given in January 2020 to turn around the Panthers the way he did college programs at Temple and Baylor. Rhule was still owed north of $40 million.
He put that in for the next 48 months, he will make $834,000 a month.
It's like 2.5 Scott Frosts.
Golly.
You too can join the program. We'd love to hear from you today. Let us know what you think on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at TT973.com. All guests appear via the Benchmark hotline.
I think he's going to be a sought-after commodity, if he wants to be, in college football. Right now, really, I mean, I'm not saying somebody's going to hire him in the next 2 weeks, but those interviews and those conversations with his agent could be happening as we speak. Because he's the one guy that's out there that
unattached.
Yeah, that's unattached. I mean, they could go. I mean, hiring Coach McGuire worked because he was a position coach at Baylor. And, it would have been interesting had he been a coordinator.
Sure,
might have been a little different in the timing of him going ahead and coming to Lubbock and who he brought with him and stuff. But right now, this is. Now, Rhule's being let go and then interviewing, as opposed to the Saban from Miami Dolphins thing 15 years ago or whatever. But, that was sort of orchestrated. But Rhule, I mean, if you're Nebraska, how do you not have that conversation? If you're Georgia Tech, how do you not have that, and maybe even some back channel if you're Auburn. If you're Wisconsin, I mean, this dude won at Temple, man. I mean, it's not like he to me, Matt Rhule, at least as a college coach, doesn't have a geography to attach to him. It's not like that worked at Temple, but it didn't. He won at Temple and in Waco. Man, that's
I'm not familiar enough with his time at Temple to really speak with any certainty about that. But I will say that I agree with you in general. If you can have success in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And in Waco, odds are you can have success in Lincoln. I think that probably what impressed me the most about what Rhule did in Waco was that he hired a very good staff.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like at Temple you were running into a bunch of guys with Texas connections. But he showed some, I would say, real keen insight into, what needs need to be filled with what people with what he did at Baylor. I do think, though, I mean, I don't think he's any kind of slam dunk.
No.
Whether you're Wisconsin or Nebraska. I mean, do you know that, and obviously Texas Tech would love to have the success over, the next few years that Rhule did at Baylor, right? The 11-win season, the 8-1 conference record, the top 15 finish, the Sugar Bowl appearance, all that, right? No, I'm not dunking on any of that stuff.
No, that's right.
But if you are an AD or a university CEO and you're charged with finding new leadership for your football program, you have to be pretty picky, right? This is a hire that you can't make a mistake on. You can't afford to. And if I'm making that decision at Nebraska, I'm going, you can't argue with the results at Baylor, but at the same time, how many ranked teams did he beat at Baylor? He won 19 games. None of those were against ranked opponents. Joe McGuire, in 6 games, has more wins over ranked teams.
Really? That's amazing.
Than Matt Rhule did at Baylor.
Wow.
In fact, Rhule has 2 wins over ranked teams as a head coach, and those both came at Temple. So, I think that if you're going to bring him in for a job where you expect to win at a really high level and very quickly, which is not necessarily what you were taking over at Temple and Waco, or Baylor rather, I think you ask those questions because I don't know that he has shown that he can do that. From that level of a program, I think he's definitely a good builder. But is that what Nebraska is looking for?
Yeah.
And how about this too, real quick? And it worked out great. I don't think that you would trade anything if you're Texas Tech, but let's rewind to last November, and Joe McGuire's first choice for defensive coordinator was a guy on Matt Rhule's staff, John Snow, and I think that's right, something Snow. Anyways, he didn't want to move. He didn't want to uproot the family. Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's a tough deal there. But it also goes with the territory. I mean,
yeah,
that's just life in that business. Those dudes are paid well, and for that compensation comes, career insecurity, and uncertainty, all that stuff, and
surely Snow will end up wherever Rhule ends up.
Right. You would think so.
Rhule has said that, hey, I've never, and this is true, he's never coached a game as a head coach without Snow on his staff.
Wow. That might have been one more thing that made it a little bit difficult for him to leave this time last year. But, yeah, well, and you never know. I mean, I don't know that Tech will be looking to make any moves this offseason, but you never know who gets called. Somebody gets called home or whatever, a position coach or something. I would think that these dudes, and again, that's not a commentary about, this or that guy's happy or who's unhappy with what position. I'm saying any of that. I'm saying somebody's alma mater calls.
It's just the numbers.
Yeah, it just happens. Yeah, it's just,
there's always some kind of
turnover somewhere, and Coach McGuire may very well go to one of those guys that was with him and Matt Rhule at Baylor, or I mean, who knows? But yeah, that's way on down the road there, and I would imagine there's going to be pretty good stability just in general across the board with Coach McGuire's staff because he was able to place all these dudes. It's not like he was hey, you got to really keep this guy and this guy and this guy. But after a year, and then that sort of thing would turn over. I don't think there's going to be a lot of that.
This on the Yates Flooring Center chat line from Chris. What are the chances that Matt Rhule ends up on Tech's coaching staff in some capacity? I mean, if you're Matt Rhule, you just got fired and you have this gigantic buyout coming your way, are you just like in just a huge hurry to go work someplace else, like right away as like an analyst type? I don't think so.
Yeah, I would. I mean, that was asked of me earlier today, and I thought, man, because the one thing about being an analyst, it does allow guys to step back and see the game through a different lens, reset their career. But I would be shocked if he showed up. I mean, most certainly if he showed up in Lubbock, Texas this fall.
Get me on the first flight to Lubbock.
Right. That would shock me. And that's no commentary on Tech, but just you got to believe just the emotional ringer he's been on,
Sure.
Is that the first thing you want to do? Now, maybe next spring. Whatever.
More Tech Talk next.
Solving life's mysteries one at a time.
I guess they're okay with that.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. I wonder what they sell there at Poundland.
Going to get some. We need some paper plates. Run over to Poundland.
Hey, I want to drop you off at Poundland.
Be back in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
This is Tech Talk on Double T 97.3. Solving life's mysteries one at a time.
Woo! Oh, wow! Woo! Yeah! Oh my! It's starting to even look like a triple rainbow.
This is Tech Talk on Double T 97.3.
Hello there, it's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Dr. Mike Gustafson. I'm Aaron Dickens. We're joining you today until 6 o'clock. We'll have Dallas Cowboys Hour coming up at 6, followed at 6:30 by coverage of Monday Night Football. It's the Raiders at the Chiefs. We'd love to get your thoughts and comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at TT973.com. All guests appear via the Benchmark Hotline. This in the chat line: firing Venables, even if Oklahoma loses out, is an absurd suggestion. I don't think so, man. Like, you're telling me that if Oklahoma goes 3-9, it goes winless in the Big 12, that it would be absurd to move on from the head coach? I don't buy it. Right? This is, I mean, Oklahoma has more talent on paper than more than half of the teams in this conference. And I think that's being generous, right? It's probably closer to 3/4 of the teams in this conference, right? They won 11 games last year. They haven't, they've been riding a train of success for the last 25 years. There's really no excuse. There's really nothing that you can point to with this team and go, oh, well, no, this is why they're losing, other than it's the head coach, it's his coordinators, it's his staff.
Yeah, I would think that it would have to be an unmitigated disaster for them to pull the trigger this year, but I would think a key area of focus would be on the recruiting class. Like, if the recruiting class really fell away, was poorly ranked, that would be the alarm bell in Norman that would have the administration going, hey, we got a problem here, because they're going to recruit, right? I mean, that's OU. They're going to recruit nationally. They're going to be able to go, they're going to have people on the other end picking up that phone call going, okay, yeah, I want to know more. And but that if they recruited poorly on the heels of a bad season, that would set off alarm bells that would probably have him entering next fall on the hot seat.
I mean, how does
and
Kansas...
he's sort of beloved there. I mean, just as a
well, not for long.
Well, I know, continues. I understand that, but I'm saying he's highly regarded there. His hire was sort of a no-brainer there, right?
I mean, he had a connection to the program, right, and had been long viewed as the next great kind of coordinator to head coach type. Mm-hmm. And he had been kind of, very carefully choosing what jobs to pursue, what not to pursue. For programs like Texas Tech that reached out, didn't really have much time for him. He had his sights set pretty high, and it worked out because he got the Oklahoma job. But, I mean, for the folks that go, oh, no, you can't move on. Like, how is it that Kansas in year one under Lance Leipold scores 14 points in the first quarter against Texas last year in Austin, and Oklahoma can't score a single point in 4 quarters? I get it. I get that they've got a backup quarterback, but still, you're Oklahoma, and that's Kansas. Right? How do you give up that many points in the first half to TCU? He's a defensive guy.
Yeah.
He's a defensive guy.
They're in disarray, man.
That's his bag.
Yep.
They do not look prepared at all. I mean, Kansas is playing more like Oklahoma this year than Oklahoma is, right? Just swap the jerseys.
It's really shocking that you just gave that point spread, and it's where it is. OU is an 8-point favorite. Golly.
Aaron, to add to your point, OU hasn't had a losing record like you suggested they might have at 3-9 since 1998 when they went 5-6.
Yeah, John Blake.
Yeah, and he was fired.
And
he was
like John Blake is their
year.
Jerry Moore. Like any time that something bad happens to Tech, right? It's like, oh, this is the worst it's been since Jerry Moore. That's what this is for Oklahoma. This is the John Blake experience.
And remember that Blake came in on the heels of the 1 year of Howard Schnellenberger.
Mm-hmm.
That was a disaster. We lived in, wasn't it 1 year? It was just 1 year,
I think it was
right?
just 1 year.
Yeah, and he was so just out of date. I mean, he and he had been one of Bear Bryant's assistants at Alabama. He was the assistant largely credited for recruiting Joe Namath to Alabama. And so we're talking about late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
Won the national championship with Miami, the U. That was sort of when they became the U, because they'd really never done anything before that. And they won it in 81 or whatever, beating Nebraska. And for somehow, some way, OU got onto him and brought him in for 1 year. And I knew some people on that staff, because we lived in Oklahoma City at the time, that were like, this is a disaster. I mean, just a disaster in terms of, he had antiquated ideas and they, sure enough, they pulled the plug. But the point is they went from Schnellenberger to John Blake. And so they were the dregs in the late 90s. But it's like a lot of programs, we're seeing this with Tennessee right now, that when they're down for a while, and then their ability to sort of snap their fingers,
like the Undertaker gif.
Yeah, and it just boom, and those brands with a lot of history can correct themselves quickly, and OU did it with the Bob Stoops hire. We know what that resulted in.
Yeah, national championship in year 2.
And right around that same time, a year earlier, Texas had sort of flopped around in the 90s, and Mac Brown was hired there, but yeah, that OU had 4 bad years, and that was on the heels of the Gary Gibbs era. And Gibbs had been a long-time coordinator there under Switzer, had played under Switzer, and he was the guy after the guy. And of course, he also had to get them through all of the NCAA mess, and the cover stories in the Sports Illustrated about guns in the dorms and all the craziness that went on there at the end of Switzer's time.
Yeah, I think these next 2 games for Oklahoma are going to be key here, because Kansas, they're an 8-point favorite, right? Probably I'd love to go back and look, but I can't, because we're on kindergarten internet here, and it's restricted. But I'd imagine this is the lowest point spread against Kansas at home for Oklahoma in decades, maybe.
And you think they're looking forward to that open week next week? I mean, the Sooners?
Yeah.
I mean, really.
And then they play at Iowa State, and Cyclones aren't some world beater.
That OU has the Kansas and Iowa State games, which have historically been big 8 doormats. Yeah. And now they're like, we need these.
They
games.
do, because they get Baylor at home, at West Virginia, and that's not an easy road trip. They get the Pokes, and then they play in Lubbock. I mean, if they're going to get right, it's going to be these next 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
Or it'll just, implode. We'll have the Dallas Cowboys Hour coming up at 6 o'clock here on Lubbock Sports Station, Double T 97.3. We'll have the Juice coming up next on Tech Talk.
Solving life's mysteries one at a time.
When I go to the restroom after having a few pops in my acid-washed overalls, when I go into that restroom after about 10 beers, urinal to the floor, I'm going pants down to the ankles.
Hey there, Mr. Wiener, what do you know? Do you need to tinkle? Yes, I do think so.
This is Tech Talk on Double T 97.3.
Hey, it's the Juice on Double T 97.3 and Double T973.com, brought to you by our friends at Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods. 2 convenient locations here in town, 4th Street in the West Loop behind the Whataburger, and also a Slide Road and 69th Street. And if you can't get out and about, you can always check them out online at specsonline.com. No baseball today. Playoffs continue tomorrow. We'll have the Mariners and the Astros for you on 100.7 The Score. First pitch, 2:37 there from Minute Maid Park in Houston. Yankees and Guardians will get started at 6:30 tomorrow. Padres and Dodgers tomorrow evening, 8:30 first pitch. And then Phillies and Braves get started earlier. They start at noon there in Atlanta. Matt Rhule has been fired as the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. He finishes with a record of 11-27. He was fired today, less than a day after a 37-15 loss to the San Francisco 49ers. You too can join the program. Would love to hear from you on the Yates Flooring Center chat line. We get this in the chat line. Matt Wells is an analyst with Oklahoma helping with game plans. It all makes sense. That's from MC. Yeah, I mean, to me, if I'm an Oklahoma fan, the more concerning thing is the defense, because that's what Venables was brought in to do, to fix the defense.
Yep, his identity should be tough guy, defensive-minded football. After a decade of Lincoln Riley really airing it out and giving up a lot of points.
I mean, who's done better with their respective defensive units this year so far? Tim DeRuyter or Brent Venables / Ted Roof? It's been DeRuyter, right? And whose roster would you have taken before the season started? Oklahoma's.
Yep. Oh, yeah. No doubt.
This on the Yates Flooring Center Challenge. Oklahoma's blaming everything this year on Lincoln Riley, so Venables has a free pass this year.
And that's why I think nothing happens this year in terms of a firing or whatever. Now, how low could it get if they lost 9 in a row and they were all 49-0? Then yeah, it could happen. We've heard, it's been publicized, the money thing, and the money thing's not our problem, obviously. I mean, what the Sooners situation is, but that narrative around them leaving the league, and them in Texas could leave early and all, they can't afford it. They can't afford to buy out their grant of rights or any of that kind of stuff. That was sort of the narrative around this. Like, Oklahoma works at a much lives much closer to the line financially. That had always been the rumor, and so writing just a monster fat buyout check or just paying it out and hiring somebody else. I mean, that's just that's fascinating. And again, we talked about that. You and I kicked that around last week. I don't know exactly where that lands. Does it mean the soccer team has less money for
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, we who knows? But I still think that he survives. But that that we're going to get a real indication of if that regime is working next spring on signing day, and you look down there and they're at the 32nd ranked class, and you go, ooh, this thing's starting to be felt in other ways. If they come in and where would they normally recruit? Top 10?
Top 15, top 10, top depends. I mean, under Lincoln Riley, they were more routinely top 10.
Yeah.
Later years of Bob Stoops, maybe top 20.
Yeah. And so if they're at 37, would be a major cause for concern, right?
This in the chat line. Oklahoma's coming off of a not so great year. Then they lost their head coach and associate head coach, and lost 30 players in the transfer portal, including several starters. I can't stand OU, but let's get a grip on Venables being fired. Yeah, I'm not saying that he will get fired, to be very clear. I think that Oklahoma, is too proud of a program to kneecap their coach after one season.
Yeah, this is really a hypothetical.
They should fire him, though.
Yeah.
If this doesn't get turned around to like 8-4 type deal, to where you close the season feeling okay, like there was a hiccup, he had to bottom out before he could kind of take it to the top. But if this craters, yeah, they should. They won't, but they should. And spare me the knots. They won 11 games. Give me a break. Like, they won 11 games. This wasn't some kind of 3-9 team that he inherited.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about their roster to know if he's playing a ton of freshmen and sophomores. I don't think they are. I just don't think they are.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't think they are either. Mm-hmm. And they lost to Kansas State, right? And you got to go scroll down the page to see where K-State is on the recruiting rankings every year. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. They lost to Kansas State. They got blown out by TCU with a first-year coach, and then they couldn't score a point against Texas. Every team in the FBS scored a point that played last weekend except for the Oklahoma Sooners.
Is that right?
Wow. And
even the Iowa teams?
Yeah, they scored 6. Right, they're a powerhouse.
Never a doubt.
Yeah. This on the Yates Flooring Center chat line from our friend Sooner Lubbock. I'm not ready to give up on the season yet, but I think this is a must-win in Norman. I think you pegged it right, Sooner.
Yeah, I mean, if Kansas and Iowa State aren't taken care of, then it sort of steps uphill from there. Now, operation like that, decent players, decent talent, they can snap their fingers and have a good game and things can come together, but which may not necessarily mark the season turnaround, but that doesn't mean they're going to be easy to play against. But But I'm with you. You would think that this Kansas game in Norman and then a week off, and so if they are beat up, they can reset, much as the Red Raiders will get to do this week, and then Iowa State. If those two aren't winnable, that's going to be a tough chore there.
Because I think a lot of the refrain, a lot of the excuses in Norman for what happened Saturday is, hey, listen, their starting quarterback was hurt. What do you want them to do?
I'll not give up 49.
Texas played their third-string guy.
Right.
And nearly beat Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Right? They were tied in the fourth quarter. If Texas Tech, which hasn't won an outright conference championship since Dwight Eisenhower was president of the United States, right? We like Ike. If Texas Tech can do that with their third-string guy, with a first-year staff, right? This is some kind of like machine that's been humming along for 2 decades, like in Stillwater or elsewhere. Then spare me the tears about Oklahoma. If Oklahoma can't field 2 or 3 different quality quarterbacks, that's on them, man. That's on the coaching staff. That's on Jeff Lebby. This in the chat line. So what college will Rhule be at next year? What do you think of maybe we should save this for the next segment because we are about a minute and a half out.
Yeah.
But of the vacancies that we know of now, and let's throw Auburn in the mix because they'll be done. I mean, that will be open up at some point. What do you think? Where do you think he fits the best?
Yeah.
I mean, Arizona State, Colorado, Georgia Tech, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Auburn.
And you and I came out of the gate in the 3 o'clock hour and happy to reset, but this was one of the first things we talked about. And, these programs that are open right now can contact his agent and say, hey, love to talk to you because he's available. It's not like Nebraska wanting to go interview somebody else's head coach or defensive coordinator.
Leipold,
this guy, Lance Leipold's going to want at least the regular season to play out. Campbell, at least whoever it is, those head coaches. But this guy right here, who's done decent things in college, he's available to be talked to right now.
And Carolina loves that. I mean, I think that was a big part of the timing here because they owe him $40 million, but that is offset by whatever he earns, over the course of the next several years. And so if he gets a college job, say he gets a Nebraska job or whatever, then every cent that he earns at Nebraska, Carolina does not have to pay. Right? And so by cutting him loose now, they've given him plenty of chances to make a move in this coming coaching carousel in college. Whereas if they had waited until the end of the season, all those jobs would have been filled.
And so when you hear about these situations when guys hate their current employer that fired them, it'll be like, hey, I'll come there and work for $1, or just the Carolina.
I think lawyers might get involved at that point,
no doubt.
But I think that to be fair, I guess Rhule, he could come in and say, listen, give me something competitive, but don't break the bank. Mm-hmm. Put that money toward my assistants.
Right. Sure.
More Tech Talk next.
Solving life's mysteries one at a time.
I guess they're okay with that.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. I wonder what they sell there at Poundland.
We want to get we need some paper plates. Run over to Poundland.
Hey, I want to drop you off at Poundland.
Be back in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
This is Tech Talk on Double T 97.3. Solving life's mysteries one at a time.
What does everybody use Q-tips for?
Ears.
You stick them in your ears. You twist them. It feels so good. Yeah. Right? You pull them out.
Don't jam them in too far.
It's a little brown. You could throw that in the trash can. 2 twists on each end, each ear for me.
This is Tech Talk on Double T 97.3.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon. It's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Dr. Mike Gustafson. I'm Aaron Dickens. We are joining you from the First United Bank Double T 97.3 studio. Love to hear your thoughts and comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at Double T 97.3.com. So before the break, I posed this question, and we kind of filled because we only had a minute and a half, not enough time to discuss. But of the vacant jobs right now in college, and we're going to throw in Auburn because that's a win, not an if. What job do you think Matt Rhule is the best fit for?
Bob, I want to put him in the Midwest for some reason. Feels like the I don't know. My answer to your question might be Wisconsin, but I also said in the 3 o'clock hour, I think he's sort of regionless, and I say that to his credit.
Mm-hmm.
You're not talking about a guy that's a tobacco chewing Southerner or a nasally Yankee, right. Or even though those things don't really matter, but it would be like, hey, let's go take Coach O. Let's go take Orgeron to Berkeley, and you go, boy, that would be comical.
Can you imagine Orgeron in Berkeley?
But I'm just saying, like, just what would be a bad fit, right? Something like that. Well, I don't think there is a bad fit for Matt Rhule. I don't see the region in which you'd go, that's just he because he's had success in Philadelphia and he had success in Waco. I don't know. The Deep South might be a challenge, and it feels like Auburn, after going with an outsider, the Boise State guy feels like they're, I think they're going to circle those wagons, those SEC wagons, and go get somebody's coordinator in the SEC or do something. I don't think they're gonna reach, and so I would maybe make that one the least. But yeah, that'd be my answer.
I think with Rhule, the temptation will be to take the most high-profile job that's out there, and that's not Rhule specific. I feel like we see that with a lot of coaches all the time. But if you look at where he had the most success, Temple and Baylor, for as successful as Baylor has been, this isn't a knock on Baylor, but they're not
blue blood.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. They're not one of the top 25 all time programs, and most teams in the conference would trade for their success immediately, right? With the drop of a hat,
for sure.
Over the last 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
But they're just not. They're a little bit under the radar, a little overshadowed by A&M, Texas, Oklahoma, LSU. And so there aren't these kind of immediate expectations when you take over a Baylor or a Temple that there will be if you're Matt Rhule and you come in at Nebraska, you're viewed as a slam dunk. Right? This is kind of all right, it's fixed.
Let's get this thing going. In 2 years, we expect to be up here somewhere.
Right. Yeah. And so I wonder if something more low key would be a better fit for him.
Which I think is, and really my only thought about why I chose Wisconsin over Nebraska is that I feel like Nebraska is going to try to do something higher profile.
I mean, I agree with you, because if he goes to Nebraska, suddenly the entire state is focused on him.
Mm-hmm.
The entire state.
Yeah, you don't even compete with professional teams there.
At all. You're
really.
the only show in town. And I think it's great in some senses.
Over where the population is, there's probably some Chiefs fans and some of that over there, but that's not theirs. It's not. It's a lot like what peak OU was to the state of Oklahoma. Peak Alabama was to the state of Alabama. That's peak Nebraska to the state of Nebraska.
So, I mean, what about a Georgia Tech?
Well,
population center, right? They have so much going on at Atlanta, plus Georgia. He won't have some kind of gigantic spotlight on him. He'll have time to work. He's in a major metro area.
Expectations aren't crazy.
Should be able to recruit. Should be able to make some hay in the ACC.
Is this your way of telling me that they're not in the Deion Sanders game?
The only downside to Georgia Tech is I think that they have some academic restrictions in place, not to the extent that Stanford does, or maybe even Notre Dame too. But it's tougher to get players to Georgia Tech than it is to, say, Arizona State or Texas Tech or Oklahoma State, whatever. So that might be a kind of a mark against them. But absent that, I think he would be a good fit there. I think he would be successful there, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
He might not make the most money there, but I think he'd find the most on-field success.
And that's that'd be a big deal. I mean, that'd be a big deal for the ACC. It'd be a big deal for Georgia Tech. I mean, because it feels like to me that program, if it's a respectable 8-4, you could probably stay there a long time. You know, I mean, like you said, they're not built on champions. Now they won one in 1990. I get it. I'm not saying they've never had any history, but just their recent, and especially with just the specter of what's happening in Athens, 2 hours down the road, I just don't feel like the expectations are off the charts there. But to get and that's an interesting dilemma to the Dion to Atlanta. There's the idea that it would be a good fit. I mean, like the Dirty Bird thing, and what Dion meant to the city of Atlanta. I mean, back in the day, is why a lot of people have gone, hey man, that'd be great. Rescue us. But I just don't know enough about where that alignment would be.
Because ultimately, a college president or chancellor, the CEO, has to sign off on this.
Right.
How many college presidents or CEOs are going to sign off on Deion Sanders? Given that he had some issues, to put it mildly, with that prime prep stuff in Dallas, right? Given the press conference at Alabama State over the past weekend, I mean,
there's a little bit of baggage.
That's a risk.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. And he's intriguing, and I wonder if desperation Auburn would do that, because Auburn's got some desperation there. Now, they need administrative alignment, all of that. Don't get me wrong. But, Auburn at peak desperate, but they're not going to get caught up in the morality of it. Whereas I think what you're saying, the president, the chancellor, or whatever at Georgia Tech's going, I'm not going down over this football program, because that football program there can go 4-8, and we're still Georgia Tech.
Right.
Highly regarded academic, big time engineering school, all the things that they've got going for them. Yeah, I'm not doing anything to get me in the headlines over here, when we're still going to finish second to Georgia.
Auburn needs someone, whether it's an AD or a respected coach, that can bring everybody in the room and say, listen, I don't care what Montgomery hates about Mobile in terms of booster factions, right? I don't care what Birmingham hates about Montgomery, right? We're headed in this direction all together, and we're all pulling the same boat. Like, all that other crap ends. And Brian Harsin definitely hasn't been able to do that. Gus Malzahn was not able to do that.
It's going to have to be someone with big traction, and yeah. I mean, it's not going to be, and it's going to have to be a cultural fit. I mean, it's just Harsin from Boise State, and I'll say this: if Harsin gets canned next week, Harsin's a candidate at Arizona State. It's something like that, because that dude, I would think that as an administrator, you're going to be able to almost erase what happened at Auburn and go,
that's Auburn. That
was a mess. Yeah, in a way, and that may be a little bit akin to maybe Sonny at Berkeley, that you go, that just wasn't enough of a fit that we could get him back here and he'll be fine.
More Tech Talk next.